Hello, welcome everyone to this month's webinar provided to you on behalf of Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation. My name is Michael Kramer. I'm the Calibration Program Manager at PJLA, and I will be presenting today's webinar for y'all. Thank you all for registering and logging in. I'm very happy to see each and every one of y'all here. Today's topic is going to be Section 8.9 of 17025, 2017, which is the section on management review. Before I get into the presentation, I just want to give you folks a little bit of a heads up. Where I'm located at in Virginia, we're having some weather moving through, and I've already lost my power twice, and internet connection has popped on and off in a couple times this morning, most recently about 15 minutes ago. So if you see me fade out, it's weather that's moving through where I'm currently located in Virginia. We're getting the remnants of that hurricane moving through where I'm at. So with that being said, just FYI, I'm going to go ahead and start presentation, hopefully without any interruptions. As always, this webinar is being recorded. You can go directly to our website. We have a webinar tab. We do have a section in there for recorded webinars. We also have just the slides. Used to get a lot of requests just for the slides of the webinars. You can get those downloaded from our website, and by all means use them to review, train your own folks. They're a resource for y'all that we have provided on our webinar, on our website. I'm sorry. Also, as always, there's a place to ask questions. So if we're going along, if anything I don't answer, if I'm not clear on anything, or have any questions, and again, please keep it in regards to today's topic, which is management reviews. Type it in that block. When we're finished with today's webinar, I will pull that up and go through as many questions as I can, and hopefully answer each and every one of them. Duration of the webinar, it should be no longer than an hour. So without further ado, let me move on. Today's topic again is Section 8.9, very last section in the 17025 2017 standard, management review. So what is a management review? One way to look at it can be described as a meeting at planned intervals to discuss the core elements of your management system. Conducting effective management review is more than just gathering everyone in a room to discuss the required standard topics so you can generate minutes for your assessor. So in other words, yes, it is required that within the standard under 8.9 that you have a management review. However, hopefully you're conducting them to benefit you. I'm not just fulfilling a requirement to show your assessor and to fulfill requirements for 17025. And I can tell you, I've been doing assessment for quite a while, and I've seen some really, really good management reviews. And I've seen some that I could say probably fall into that category. Hey, we just need to do this because it's a requirement. So again, looking at a management review can also be looked at as a special meeting of the laboratory's top management, called to discuss the effectiveness of the laboratory management system and or testing calibration, could add sampling in there too now, and any changes that may be needed. Usually management reviews are timed to follow closely after each internal audit. So that the results of the audit may be discussed during the management review. So you'll see here as we go on, the internal audit is a input, and ideally you want to have that done before the management review, not vice versa. So those folks that are already in the 2017, hopefully you've already conducted a management review. You're well aware of the requirements. For those folks that are going to transition here. And again, in case you haven't heard, due to the current COVID-19 issue, the transition period has been extended through the end of June. After that, that period, 2005 ISO 17025 will not be recognized as a current standard, and we won't be able to assess. So hopefully, for those of you that are transitioning, or those to the 2005, from 2005 to 2017, the requirements are there, but there are some changes. Some of the inputs have been changed. For example, customer feedback, which was in there in 2005, is now customer and personnel feedback. Another a slight revision is, instead of recommendations for improvement, it's been modified to specify effectiveness of any implemented improvements. There's been some added inputs, changes in internal and external issues, fulfillment of objectives, status of actions from previous management reviews, adequacy of resources, and results of risk identification are all additions. And the outputs, there's an input section and there's an output section. Outputs have been detailed. Forces your hand somewhat on here. Hopefully, you get some good output from your management, your management review. The outputs include the effectiveness of the management system and its processes, improvement in the laboratory activities related to the fulfillment of the requirements of this document, provisions of required resources, and any need for change. So we'll go into these in a little bit more detail as we get into the presentation. So getting right into the requirements, 891. The laboratory management shall review its planned systems at planned intervals. And I highlighted planned intervals because that is the requirement as far as how often you have to have a management review. Planned intervals in order to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness, including the stated policies and objectives for the fulfillment of this document. And this document is 17025, 2017. The recommendation, there was a recommendation via a note in the 2005 that recommended to be done every 12 months. I still believe that's a good, at least a minimal amount that a management review should be completed every 12 months. However, as far as the requirement, and I have it boldfaced there, it says plan intervals. So if I'm an assessor, when I get to the section on management and okay, It's not good. I see I lost and regained connection again. Okay, so a question that I proposed here is who should attend the management review? So the number of participants, of course, one thing that's going to hint should be looked at is the size of your organization. In bigger companies, a special meeting should be organized in the management circle. Smaller companies, the entire staff may be involved. The minimum, however, should be your lab or technical manager and the quality manager, and the quality manager. As per 2017, whoever is identified in the following requirement under structural requirements. The laboratory shall identify management that has overall responsibility for the lab. So that individual should also be involved in the management review. Like to see top management involved in the management review. Looking at another clause in there, one good way to show compliance with clause 8233. And I apologize. I was just I'm having connection issues here due to the weather. So if you heard me go blank and appeared I did. Now I'm back connected. Up here we're getting the weather moving through my area right now. So again, for compliance to the 2017 standard, you want to at least assure you capture the required inputs and outputs. One way to assure that is prepare an agenda, a template, including these required inputs and outputs, and assure that the required inputs and outputs are going to be included in your management review. As an assessor, when I get to the section on management review, say cold, I haven't seen the management review. First of all, I always look at first of all that predetermined schedule. When was it done? Was it done within your predetermined schedule? Then secondly, I like to see the attendance. Who was there? Was laboratory top management was there? I always like to see good participation in the management review. And then go and look at the required inputs and outputs, assuring all they have been captured. And then I like to see some beef behind the management review. Good dialogue, good discussions, hopefully some good opportunities for improvement has presented itself. Management review was well documented and had some good dissertation behind the required inputs and outputs. Bare bones minimum, what we're about to go through, are required. You can use, you can expand on here, anything else that you feel important to discuss at your plan management review can be added. But bare bones minimum, as far as 17025, the following inputs and outputs will need to be captured. Internal audit against management reviews, hence, like I specified earlier, you should do your internal audit prior to the management review. Got compliance there. Internal audits are used as a vehicle for compliance to the standard, compliance to your accreditation bodies requirements, your own requirements. So management review, ideally, you should be a vehicle to be where it will actually be used as a vehicle that would present opportunities for improvement. So a record needs to be maintained, of course, in the management review. The inputs to the management review shall be recorded and shall include information related to the following. So again, need to create a record. Going through the required inputs. The inputs shall be recorded and include changes in internal and external issues that are relevant to the laboratory. Internal, things within your four walls. Could have equipment, examples could be aging equipment, could be personnel, aging personnel, retirements, things of that nature, company policies that affect the laboratory operations. These are things that are referred to as internal issues. External is things outside your four walls. Try to depict there. We don't operate in a bubble. Things happen around us that we can't control, i.e. the weather, in my case right now. However, they're out of our control, but they could possibly impact laboratory operations. Got COVID-19 here, so practically every management review I've seen, this has been an issue. It's affecting the way we do business, the way we do assessments. Been doing a lot of virtual assessments, a lot more folks working from home. Totally out of our control right now. Hopefully, not too much longer. Other things that can also be considered, and by all means, this is not all encompassing, is any sort of regulation that outside of the organization's control that you need to comply with, competition, accreditation requirements, any sort of new technology, possible external issues that could be brought to light. Input shall include the fulfillment of objectives. So earlier in the standard, we had this clause here as a requirement. Laboratories shall establish, document, and maintain policies and objectives for the fulfillment of the purposes of this document, and shall ensure that the policies and objectives are acknowledged and implemented at all levels of the laboratory operations. So this is a good time to go back and revisit that clause yourself and just basically ask your question. Hey, how did you do? Did you meet those established objectives that you have in place as per 821? Input shall include suitability of policies and procedures. So is your quality management system, your internal system, is it reflective of the way you're doing business? Running your laboratory? Are you doing what's in your quality management system? What you say is what you're doing. Has any external documents been revised? Part of document control, internal and external. Got to make sure if you're incorporating any external documents into your a quality management system that you're operating off the latest, current, and greatest issue, NIST, ASTM, U.S. Pharmaceutical, or a few that come to mind. Here was still on the inputs, a status action from previous management reviews. It's Steve, but I think this is a good place to start with the management review, is go back and revisit the previous management review. Action items, were there any action items? Were they assigned? Had they been accomplished? Ideally, anything that was brought forth in the previous management review should be looked at. And if there was any action items, hopefully is a good time to revisit them, make sure that they've been closed, and if there are any pending issues from the previous management review. Outcome of recent internal audit. So again, we said this should be done prior to the management review. Yes, it should be more than did you actually do the internal audit? Is the process effective? One good way to look at that is a lot of folks do their internal audits prior to the external audit that say us at PJLA would come to. Ideally, I love to see, personally, when I look at internal audits, I like to see good internal audits. I like to see good objective evidence listed as to what was reviewed in order to make a statement of compliance. And I really, and I say this sincerely, I love it when organizations have findings on themselves doing internal audits. It shows to me as an assessor, hey, you're taking it to heart. You're running through the corrective action program, and hopefully you find it before I find it. So is your process effective? Input should include corrective actions. So any corrective actions since the prior management review should be more than stating a simple statement of, hey, we've had some, specifying how many you had. It should incorporate any corrective actions from both external and internal sources. Should be asking yourself, well, what were they? Have they been implemented? Are there any open corrective actions? Has corrective actions been monitored and been effective? That is a corrective action is not closed until some time ideally has passed and your organization had made a determination, hey, we hit the root cause and took corrective action, and it appears it's been effective. Are there any repeats? If there's a repeat on a corrective action, then you might want to go back and look at that root cause. Are the staff aware of the process, or anything's falling between the cracks, or some good things to sort of open up during your management review under 892F. Should include assessments by external bodies. So other than your internal audit, the first thing I think of is your accreditation agency. PJLA, for example. However, it could be from other sources. By who? Could be a customer audit. Could be perhaps your government type audit that you're subjected to. So who did it? By who? When? When is the next scheduled audit? Were there any findings, concerns, or recommendations from your external audit? One thing you might want to ask, if the external body is having findings, why aren't they being found during the internal audit? So ideally, you should be looking at the same requirements that as far as PJLA and 17025 accreditation, you should be looking at those same requirements. Should be looking at also the policies of the accreditation body. So like I said, I love it when I see findings because it makes my job easier. You find them before I find them. Other things, inputs, changes in the volume and type of work or the range of laboratory activities, or any trends detected. Possibility you may need to shift resources if there's an area that work is increasing, work is decreasing. Could be a shift of resources, financial, human, resources, equipment type resources, facility type resources. May need to train additional human resources, for example, if you need to cross-train some folks over to an increasing area where you're trending increased calibration or testing request. Okay, again, another input is customer and personnel feedback. So personnel feedback is an addition. So what are your folks telling you? Is a addition. Earlier in the standard, a requirement, you shall seek feedback, which means you have to actively go and seek feedback, both positive and negative, from your customers. And that feedback shall be analyzed and used to improve the management system, laboratory activities, and customer service. Well, now's a good time to ask, well, I've seen, like I said, I've seen some really good management review that really dissects customer feedback. And I've seen some that basically says, well, we sent out our surveys. Again, management review should be opportunities for improvement. Folks sending out surveys, you sent out 200, you only got 1 or 2 back. I hear this quite often with surveys. Then you might want to take a look at, hey, we're doing it because the standard says we're doing it, but we're not. It's not being very effective for us. So perhaps some alternative sources of seeking feedback should be sought. Complaints. Got to include inputs, any complaints, hopefully beyond if you received any. Are there any trends, any corrective action taken as a result of the complaints? Are they being processed according to Section 7.9 of 17025, which now has 8 different clauses to it? It's a section on complaints. Are complaints being directed to the proper personnel? Are your folks, are top management or the folks that need to know about them, are they aware of the complaints? Ideally, if there are complaints, they're being processed accordingly. They're being heard. You can respond to the complaints other than perhaps the customer going someplace else for their testing or calibration needs. So ideally, even with customer feedback, ideally, if there is an issue out there, is positive and negative feedback that you can find out about it prior to your customer, perhaps taking matters into their own hands and moving on. So complaints should be very high up in the agenda item of management reviews. 892J, input of complaints. Other input is the effectiveness of any implemented improvements. I have a clause here. Again, ask yourself, well, the laboratory shall identify and select opportunities for improvement and implement any necessary actions. So again, this could also be preventive action. Those folks that are transitioning, you don't see a preventive action mentioned, but if you look at improvements, that could be a proactive type approach. Also, the section on risk could be looked at as a preventative type approach. Adequacy of resources. Do you have enough? Listed equipment, human facilities, could be others that needs to be you need to ask yourself during the management review and make a record of it. Risk. So 8.5 section on risk and opportunities is new to the 2017 standard. So you want to go back and you want to visit this during the management review. What sort of risk has been presented? You can see the requirement that there, new requirement in 2017, section on risk and opportunities. So what risk has been identified? Was the risk taken? Was it mitigated? Or did your organization completely avoid taking that risk? What was the outcome? Again, the 2017 standard strongly emphasizes risk-based thinking. The word risk appears 30 times in the document compared to only 4 times in the 2005 standard. So management review is a required input, but again, go back and look at the requirement under 8.5 and input it during your management review. What I've listed here are a few questions that can be asked. Outcomes of assurance of validity of results. This would include proficiency testing. You know, if you're accredited with Perry Johnson, have you done your proficiency testing? Do you need to redo your 4-year plan? We're probably most important that you did your proficiency testing. What were the results of your proficiency testing? Hopefully everything fell within acceptable predefined limits. Could also include other things, intermediate checks on equipment. Are they being done? Control charts being maintained? And what is any statistical analysis showing you? Are you getting higher standard deviations, perhaps, if you're incorporating control charts into your testing or calibration activities? Yeah, an all catch-all area. Other relevant factors such as monitoring activities and training. Very last input there. All right, that was 892 input. 893 is the outputs. Again, I highlighted shall record. So in reviewing a management review, I'd like to see a record that all the inputs and outputs were taken into consideration. And a record needs so it needs to be part of the actual record of the management review, the output. So we went through the inputs, the outputs. So forces your hand a little bit here. Ideally, like I said, a management review, other than being a requirement within 17025, can actually be a vehicle that will interject opportunities for improvements. And these include an overall synopsis of the effectiveness of your management system and its processes. Any improvements of the laboratory activities related to the fulfillment of this document. Provisions of resources. You have these needs. Ask yourself, are the required resources being supplied? And last but not least, D, is there any need to change? 893D. So the standard now specifies these actions need to be recorded as well. Sorry about that. All right, that will bring us to the end of the webinar presentation. So give me a moment here. Hopefully things look like it went pretty well there as I got into it. I may have faded in and out a couple times due to the weather. I got a couple here about power. And I did realize that at the beginning, and I sincerely hope that was just at the very beginning of the presentation. And I could actually really hear the wind outside during that time. So those of you that joined us late, I have a couple questions about that. Is where I'm located at here in Virginia, I was having some weather issues, and I actually lost power and internet connection prior to this webinar. And I made the announcement, hey, if I faded out, you know, it's due to something that's out of my control, the weather here in central Virginia, and causing my internet connection to go out. So I have a lot of lost audio, and I know there at the beginning I saw it popping in and out, and then I sort of got onto a good how do you handle internal complaints if you only test your products? I'm assuming you're saying you're perhaps like a calibration lab, or a if you only test your products. So or a testing lab, or excuse me, a calibration lab. Perhaps you're doing testing, or perhaps you're a calibration lab within a manufacturer, and you only calibrate. You only do work internally. I used to work for a Fortune 500 company here in the standards lab, and we only did calibrate our standards. So I know what you're referring to. So just thinking about that. Well, one thing, you have complaints. You do have personnel feedback. It's now customer and first personnel feedback. So I guess it depends on how you want to look at it. If it is internal and within your organization, say perhaps another department, then I would handle it just like an external complaint. Yes, it's a complaint, but if it's within the confines of your testing, or your testing, calibration, or sampling activities, if it's within those confines, then I would look at it as perhaps customer feedback. Can a third party be used for internal audits? Yes, by all means, a third party can be used. If you're able to do that, that's great. Ideally, the third party should be trained and knowledgeable within 17025 and internal auditing. One thing you want to assure is impartiality. So a third party source doing your internal audit, you can hopefully be assured that you're going to have that impartiality aspect into presented into the internal audit. We have a small test lab. The techs and myself, can we audit our own work? Again, we're getting into internal auditing here, which, by the way, is going to be the presentation for, and I'll pull it up here, next month. Oh, I lost my place in my questions. Sort of bear with me again. I had one individual ask me about a small lab, small test lab. Can you audit your own work? Ideally, you don't want to do that. You can, ideally, if you can audit each other's work. However, if you are doing your own internal audit, I would say just do the best you can between your two individuals and maintain that impartiality. That internal audits is being done impartial. Bear in mind, even if you are doing your own internal audit, and I used to do quite a few myself. I'd like I said, I like finding folks have findings on themselves. So if you're doing your own internal audits and you're not having any findings, and then your external audit auditor comes in and having quite a few of them, but perhaps the root cause could be an inefficient internal audit. So if you feel you can adequately do it in an impartial manner within a two-person organization, by all means, but however, try to maintain that impartiality the best you can. I'm getting some more things about the audio. I'll have to, when I get off, I'll check with our folks, make sure, see how much of this was lost. Here's a question about proficiency tests. That's an input item. PJ requires proficiency testing to cover your scope. How do you document the plan, interval, and the interval? Again, let me just whoever asked that question, go to our website, go to PL under resources, documents, PL1 is our policy on proficiency testing. What you're asking is documented there. How do you document? Well, you have a form that's referenced in PL1. We like for you to use it. We don't require it. However, it's called an LF81 form. That's also available on our website as a resource for you to document your 4-year plan. So PL1 goes into everything you wanted to know about PJLA and the policies for proficiency testing. And we will be updating everything very shortly. We are still referencing some sections in the 2005 standards, for example, that we need to change. So currently, what you're asking is in PL1, talks about disciplines, sub-disciplines. You asked, do you have to audit do a proficiency test for every item on your scope. PL1 specifies if an item is considered within the same discipline, and then basically if the procedure, equipment, are about the same, you can incorporate them into one proficiency plan. We are a small organization. Can technical and quality be the same person? Yes, by all means. 17025, actually, the 2017, you no longer have that requirement for having a technical and quality manager. However, I see a lot of folks still using it. I felt it was a good concept. However, 2017 is a lot less prescriptive, so it's not a requirement anymore. Yes, by all means, I even wore 2 hats before. For smaller organization, the quality manager can also be the technical manager. Yes, there's nothing specified that would not be acceptable. How do you suggest recording outputs? I basically make sure you have a section called outputs, and I would ask questions pertaining to those specific items on the output section, which is identified at 893. Is your management system and its processes effective? Yes, no, and ideally why or why not? Has there been any improvement activities for the fulfillment of the requirement of this document? Are there any that presented themselves? Has any been taken? And rate the overall effectiveness. Does our staff have adequate resources? 893E, provisions of resources. And last but not least, just point blank ask your questions. Are there any need for change? You've done your management review. Like I said, ideally, you're not doing it just because the standard says you have to do it. It will present some opportunities for improvement. Customer feedback. I mean, if there's any trends that are being detected, perhaps that could trigger something and a need to change something. So yes, just assure they're recorded. You can clearly identify those items been recorded, and I'd say basically you should just basically ask yourself some questions related to those outputs. Okay, apparently I went silent during the plan interval. We were discussing that requirement, which is at the very first part of the standard under 891. You have to conduct your management review at plan intervals. 2005 had a note that recommended you do it at least once a year. That note's been removed. I still think it's a good practice to at least do them once a year. So somewhere in your quality management system, you have to establish that plan interval. And if you didn't hear that part of the audio, I said as an assessor, what I always do, first thing I look at is when was it done and has it been done according to your plan interval. So if you say it would be at least annually, that's now a requirement. You've established a plan interval and it needs to be done within on an annual type basis. All right, quite a good questions here. Getting some here other than my sound was going out, so hopefully it went through. Have you accredited government labs, and is this easily done within the framework of government requirements and ISO requirements? I actually was worked for quite a long time for a 17025 accredited facility, government lab. And yes, if you're 17025 accredited, you're a government lab. There's no uh, there's nothing presented that excuses you from not fulfilling the requirement of Section 8.8. So, not sure if I completely understand the question there, but if you're a government lab or affiliated in some way, shape, or form, and I used to work for state government, and I'm a calibration person. I got my start in the state metrology lab, and we were a 17025 facility, and had to comply with the management review. Our 17025 assessor was looking for air management review in the same manner as I'm looking for him now as an assessor when I'm conducting private industry. What are some of the risks you should identify? And again, just pertaining to 17025 and the requirements on management review, you need to comply with 8.5. So whatever vehicle you put in place to show that you've adopted a risk-based sort of thinking mentality, and you're creating the record that this has taken place as per section 8.5. If you're a small organization, perhaps even the management review is a good time to sort of even present any sort of risk and opportunities. One thing that needs to be looked at on a continual basis, and this is at the very first part of the standard 4.1.4, the management review is a good time to ask yourself, are there any risks to impartiality? So risk comes up initially during in the section on impartiality. It needs to be done on a continual basis. So if you go back and you look at that clause, and there is a shall there though. So as an assessor, sort of prefix for me right there at 414, when I, especially for initial accreditations or those folks that are transitioning, need to see at least bare bones minimal that any risk to impartiality has been looked at. Could be that perhaps there are no risks. It's been looked at, nothing's changed. However, it still needs to be revisited. So I would say the management review would be a good opportunity. Has anything changed? Personnel change? Any of the relationships? There's a note under 414 that talks about types of relationships. Has any of those come into play? And then also just a good time to look at any opportunities that are presented and any risk that can be encountered in proceeding with an opportunity. How is a lab organized that is a subset of a larger company handled, i.e. the lab also be? Not sure what you referring to there. I'm assuming you're referring to as a lab, you're a part of a larger organization. I gave the example of perhaps a testing lab or a calibration lab within a manufacturer facility. And general rule of thumb, I'm not saying this is required, but one thing, well, just backtrack a little bit. You have to identify the person that has overall responsibility of the lab. So that person should be involved in the management review. I always felt that anybody that has any authority as for the allocation of resources for your lab should be present. So I hope I answered your question there. But yes, if you're a part of a larger organization, you have to have a management review. How should that be handled? I would ask yourself, who who have we identified as the individual that has overall responsibility for the lab? And just an add-on, and this is me speaking, who has authority as far as the allocation of resources over the lab? And then anybody within laboratory, the operations under them. And I always said the more the merrier. I just did an assessment this week. 18 individuals were involved in the management review. That is the entire staff of the lab. So top management was there. And I'm not exaggerating this one bit. They had 41 opportunities for improvement that came out of that management review. The more the merrier. So more folks that are involved, the more participation that is in the management review, I personally feel is the best way. And of course, top management, as per who has overall responsibility for laboratory operations, and myself speaking, whoever has authority over the resources that are allocated to the lab should be involved in the management review. I have a few thank you. Really appreciate I enjoy doing these webinars, and I hope these are a resource for you. Again, if you have a colleague that missed it or you want the slides, you can go to our webinar, or excuse me, our website, www.pjlabs.com. Here's one that's specifically related to proficiency testing, and of course, yes, PT is a item for within the management review. It should be input. And it basically is talking about, I guess, a failed proficiency test. You have an EN more than one, which that's an eNormal analysis being done in a proficiency test. What decisions are we taking? The management review meeting. Ideally, you don't want to wait until the management review meeting to take action on that failure. You have an EN failure, even the sectional validity of testing or calibration results specified, hey, you need to take appropriate action. So even if I'm sort of switching gears here now, if I'm assessing proficiency testing, yes, I want to see that you've done your proficiency ton, and was it done within the framework set within PL1, and then how did you do? If you failed a proficiency test, you want to take corrective action. You don't want to wait until the management review, because you need to implement actually your procedure, your protocol in non-conforming calibration work. Hey, if there is a problem, you want to get it fixed and you want to make it right. And if it was an issue that actually impacted your customer's report, then you might have to actually do a little bit of a recall there. And the longer you wait, the longer that without doing something, if you know what the term reverse traceability is, if it's a piece of equipment or whatever was incorporated into the failed PT, you need to go back and you have to look at all the possible results that may have been impacted. I am in disagreement with your technical and quality manager requirement comment. Not sure what that's referring to. It was myself, and I said I felt that if you have a technical and quality manager, that they should be utilized in the management review. 17025/2017 does not even require that you have somebody who is per se technical or quality manager. However, you have to identify the individual that's having overall responsibility in the laboratory. And to me, with the management review, why would you not want to include your technical and quality manager in the meeting? If you look at those required inputs and outputs, I think that would have an impact in either if you're overall quality or overall technical. So that's my take on it. We'll get to the end of the line here. That's true. I've come across that too. You work with many quality managers that don't have technical knowledge. Um, just basically a recommendation for another webinar on correction factors. Um, there is a when you get your reports in, you have to, if you're actually incorporating correction factors, you have to go and make sure they're updated. And I did a webinar, and it escapes me now, where I go through a brief synopsis on what a correction factor is. So, for example, if you're sending a thermometer in for calibration, and one thing you need to be specifying is your requirement for the spec. When I say that you're saying something is in tolerance or out of tolerance, you could have customer supplied specifications. And you could already make the determination, hey, this could be off by this much before it possibly can impact anything. So if the correction factor is um, big enough, if it covers a larger customer space specification, then the correction factor would be a non-factor with that. I'm not sure I really understand the question. I can't see having an entire webinar on that. You just need to look at it on a case-by-case basis. Do you need to utilize the correction factor? Is it being utilized in any sort of calculation, and update your spreadsheet appropriately? Yeah, you might know I do. You have a next question I'm looking at. How do you define technical manager? ISO definition is not the same as over manager. I always call, to me, and it's just me speaking now, I'm not speaking from any sort of publication. Technical manager is the most knowledgeable person as far as the overall operation and technical aspects of the organization. Um, Also, there should be a good manager. Organizational skills should be involved in that, and they should also be versed on the technical requirements of 17025. I'm not sure of what the ISO definition of a technical manager is. You can type that in if you have it. I'll read it out loud here. Yeah, but and it's some of these are opinions, and I can agree and not agree. And of an individual specified, my opinion is any person in your organization with a title management should be at the management review meeting. Yes, I don't. I think that's a good. Please excuse me. I don't know what that's my very last thing I have on here. Not sure what that's in regards to. And I have reached the end of the. How about the quality? A quality manager and a quality assurance officer. And like I said, the stand 2017, you don't see that term come up with at all in a quality man as the quality manager. You want to make it work for you. And a lot of it's going to depend on the complexity of your organization, the size of your organization. Yes, you could have a quality manager and a quality assurance officer, somebody who perhaps oversees it on a day-to-day basis, and then somebody that, I'm assuming that you're part of a larger organization, may have be over quality of perhaps several departments. I do also do assessments for 9001, and I do them sometimes, and I recently done one back to back where you have different folks involved in the 9001 audit as opposed to the 17025 assessment. Okay, that is the the end of the webinar, and I've messed up my screen here. There we go. So I want to thank everybody for attending. I appreciate it. I sincerely hope that you found this month's webinar beneficial and something you could take forth on doing your next management review. Again, our next scheduled assessment will be, and I want to thank the individual that reminded me last month when I was announcing this month that I actually scheduled it on Thanksgiving. And I've since then moved that to Monday the 23rd. Our next webinar is going to be on internal audits, section 8.8 of 17025, 2017. I apologize if I had, it appeared I had a lot going on at the beginning with my internet going on and off, and I kept getting these things flashed across my screen here that was off, and then it was on again. So, yeah, I apologize for that. These are, we were talking about the management review of internal and external issues. So this was totally external and something I had no control of, but hopefully it didn't impact this assessment too, but not this assessment, this webinar too much. So thank you everybody. And I look forward to presenting next month on internal auditing.